Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
This is KRWG Public Media, TV, radio, online. News that matters. Now, across the Mesilla Valley and the borderland, the stories that shape our community. From the KRWG Broadcast Center at New Mexico State University, this is Newsmakers.
Thank you for joining us for Newsmakers. I'm Casey Counts. After allegations of hazing, NMSU Chancellor Dr. Dan Arvizu canceled the rest of the season for Aggie men's basketball. Those allegations came on the heels of a shooting involving a player that left a UNM student dead. We'll hear from longtime Sports Talk host Steve Kaplowitz from El Paso's ESPN radio affiliate KROD about the incidents, the investigations, and the indications for the future of the program. But first, KRWG Public Media's Johnny Coker reported on the matter after Chancellor Dan Arvizu held a news conference with Athletics Director Mario Mocha.
NMSU Chancellor Dan Arvizu and Athletic Director Mario Mocha held a conference and took questions from the press at Fulton Athletic Center on the university's campus. During the press conference, Chancellor Arvizu said he's repulsed by what's been happening. However, despite the state of the program, he has not lost faith in Mario Mocha.
There are some issues that we need to see. Why did it take so long to understand that there was an issue? We will get to the bottom of that. Again, partially a coach's responsibility, partially a process responsibility, and we'll look at all of those things simultaneously. But I think there's plenty of evidence to support that this particular incident or a set of incidents is contained in our men's basketball program, primarily a coach responsibility, but the oversight of that is in question, and we will continue to look at that going forward.
On February 10th, a member of the NMSU basketball team told police that beginning around July of 2022, he was a victim of multiple instances of hazing. In a redacted police report obtained by KRWG, the victim alleges sexual contact, false imprisonment, and harassment by 3 teammates, with one of the most recent incidents happening on February 6th. As of February 15th, no charges have been filed. As a result of the allegations, NMSU Chancellor Dan Arvizu canceled the men's basketball season and subsequently fired NMSU's head coach, Greg Heyer. The rest of the men's basketball staff is on paid administrative leave, according to the university, and 3 players have entered the NCAA transfer portal. New Mexico State's basketball season has been shrouded in controversy since NMSU player Mike Peake was involved in a shooting on the UNM campus last November that left 1 UNM student dead and 3 UNM students arrested. So far, no charges have been filed against any NMSU personnel in that incident, but investigations surrounding the incident are still ongoing. When asked if there was extra oversight of the program after the deadly incident in November, Mocha said that there was. According to the February 10th police report, allegations of hazing were not unique to NMSU's home locker room at the Pan American Center, but also happened during away games. However, it is unclear when and where each instance occurred.
As far as an increase of oversight, I can tell you on every single away trip, we sent an upper-level administrator to that game, whether it was myself, whether it was one of our 2 deputy ADs or one of our 2 senior associates. So there wasn't a time where there was an away trip from home that there wasn't a senior level administrator with the men's basketball program.
Arvizu said that the investigation surrounding the November 17th shooting hasn't been concluded, in part because it's been difficult to talk to Heyer.
One investigation regarding that particular event is not completed, and part of the reason it hasn't been completed is that the coach has represented counsel, and it's been difficult to interview him. In the context of that, we've looked at all the surrounding evidence to essentially bolster our case for the termination of the coach, and in that context, that decision was made based on the information that we have at the current time.
Mocha said that he's been in contact with the commissioner of the Western Athletic Conference and Conference USA, NMSU's new athletic conference beginning July 1st, 2023. He intends to have the men's basketball program operational by next season.
As far as the continuation of the program, there certainly are games left. Our focus right now is not to rush out and seek a new coach. We're trying to get a resolution to this circumstance, but we certainly intend on playing men's basketball next year, for the Aggies.
In less than a year, the NMSU men's basketball program went from celebrating a first-round upset in the NCAA tournament against the University of Connecticut to being shrouded by controversy and ultimately shut down. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Johnny Coker.
For 20 years, according to the KROD website, our guest today has eaten, slept, and bled area sports programs. He's also a member of the El Paso Athletic Hall of Fame and has hosted Sports Talk in El Paso for 20 years. Steve Kaplowitz, welcome to KRWG's Newsmakers.
Thank you so much, Casey. It's great to see you again, and thanks for having me today.
Well, I get the sense that you've hosted Sports Talk a little bit longer than 20 years.
I have. Actually, it just shows you that the website has not been updated recently, but I took over an afternoon drive in El Paso in the summer of 1997, so it'll be 26 years here coming up. And the fun part about the show is I get a lot of listeners and callers from Las Cruces because the signal for the radio station travels very easily here to Las Cruces, and we've developed a really nice, loyal listenership over here.
Well, obviously, we have a lot on the table to discuss today. Thank you so much for coming to offer your perspective. I'd like to begin with just a little bit about the NMSU men's basketball program history. I think fans have somewhat become accustomed to making an appearance at the big dance. Obviously not the case this year. Let's go back a little bit and talk about the rich history of the program.
I mean, you can go back to really the late 60s, early 70s when you had Don Haskins at UTEP and Lou Henson here at New Mexico State, and they had a great rivalry that dates back 50 plus years, and New Mexico State even was a Final Four team back in 1970. So it started then and then transitioned through the 80s and 90s, and we started to see New Mexico State just win and keep winning. And that's the thing that I think most people here in Las Cruces, I don't want to say they're spoiled, but they're used to a really good team that year after year will go to the NCAA tournament. It really started consistently with Marvin Menzies, then went to Reggie Theus and Paul Weir, and most recently Chris Jans. So when you look at this program and you look at the success, last season they won the first round of the tournament. I mean, this is a program that has been consistently one of the best mid-major programs in the country.
Let's discuss the recent incidents. Obviously, we got a sense at the beginning of the program of what all has occurred up to the last news conference that the university did regarding the situation. Let's begin with the shooting on the UNM campus. I mean, when you heard the news of what was developing there, what were your thoughts?
Shocked. I mean, most of the times when you're dealing with a rivalry game like New Mexico State, New Mexico, the big I-25 rivalry, you're never expecting to hear the news like we heard the morning of that game and the events that happened, and then the details and really the fallout afterwards. So this story doesn't happen in sports, especially in the college sports world, but it did. And yeah, that was definitely, I think it caught a lot of us by surprise. And the thing about this story is not so much the events of what happened, but it's what happened afterwards. And that's kind of the story that really made more of the national headlines, I think.
Well, you're speaking of maybe the team bus coming back to Las Cruces being pulled over midway by state police. I mean, as those parts of the story started to evolve,
yeah.
What did you predict from that time would be happening next?
Well, I didn't know if the team would keep playing or if they would kind of put things on hold until they sorted things out and the effect it would have on the team. Those were all things we were kind of wondering. Because you remember, in the games right after that incident, they beat UTEP by 20 points here in Las Cruces, and it seemed like it didn't even faze anybody. But then, following that game, you started to see the Aggies lose and keep losing, and all of a sudden, you never see a New Mexico State team lose 8-9 in a row, especially games at home. So you wondered if maybe all of the stress and things that were going on with the investigations were starting to take its toll a little bit on the program itself.
Well, let's talk about the independent investigation into the shooting, the results of which were just recently released. Here's a little bit of what the report revealed. Quote, It is our understanding that neither the NCAA nor the WAC has indicated that NMSU's conduct in connection with the incident violated NCAA or WAC governing rules. After performing independent research, we also did not identify any such violations of NCAA or WAC rules. Moreover, from an institutional perspective, we did not identify any failure by NMSU to meet its legal obligations in managing its student athletes. End quote. The report made recommendations for improvements in 6 areas. They are curfew, weapons policy, communication with law enforcement, institutional culture, oversight, and the athletics handbook being updated. I'd like to start with institutional culture and oversight. So the overriding theme of these recommendations is have rules, have written rules, make sure everyone knows the rules, and people should follow the rules. Where do you see that institutional role, and did you recognize a breakdown there?
Well, the first thing you think of is an athlete, student athlete carrying a gun on a road trip. Okay, that's the first thing, and that's something that nobody would ever think about. And again, you wonder the events that led to it, because it all stemmed from the football game and the fight in the stands that happened prior to this basketball trip. That's kind of where things began. As far as curfew goes, they had a curfew. There was an assistant coach in the lobby of the hotel until like 1 in the morning. So you kind of say to yourself, well, what more can you do? Do you want to put trackers on players and make sure that if they go out, something goes off? So they had the curfew in place. The curfew was broken. And at that point, the program has got to do what they need to and perform the proper steps to discipline athletes. If you're breaking curfew and that's against the rules, especially for a rivalry game, you got to take those kind of actions. So it's not like players could just come and go as they pleased. Maybe they were avoiding the coaches that they knew were downstairs. I don't exactly know the events of how it went down, but the program did have a coach that was specifically there to make sure players were in their hotel room. Obviously, that did not work out the way everybody expected.
Yeah, indeed. How long do you think it will take to act on these recommendations and to put in place the mechanisms that may have been missing here?
Oh, I guess the question is also the student handbook. And I haven't seen the student handbook, so I don't exactly know all the details in there. But when you talk about some of the language, I mean, cooperating with authorities, we already know the events of what happened. Had the bus maybe not left and stayed put and everybody talked to the police at the time, maybe this wouldn't have been the kind of situation it turned into. I'm sure that there will be a handgun policy that is now in place. They talked about that at the press conference. And I would assume that knowing that the entire program is going to be under the microscope for at least the foreseeable future, NMSU will go out of their way to make sure that everybody on the team, whether it's players, coaches, staff, cooperates and and doesn't have any more issues like what we've seen.
I know we'll move on to this subject just a little bit later, but when you talk about whoever the incoming coach is going to be, it's got to be an intimidating situation to come into.
So it's a tough situation for anybody to inherit, because you think about what happened. We haven't brought up the hazing, that'll be next. But between what happened in December, what happened a couple of months later, you're taking over a program that has been at the top of their league, but now you have to rebuild it. It might not be as difficult as you think because of the name, image, likeness, NIL opportunities, where nowadays student athletes that come in will be getting money for their name, image, and likeness. And if this school has a fund set up like so many other universities do, you can bring in players and rebuild quicker. But you still have to go into an athlete's home, and you have to talk to their parents, and you have to tell them that despite what's happened, things are, they will be improving, they will be better, because there's probably going to be a lot of tough questions with recruits wondering, what is New Mexico State like right now, and are their families going to be okay sending their student athletes to Las Cruces to help rebuild the culture and the program here at New Mexico State?
Well, a day after the results of the Rohde Law Firm investigation were sent out to the university community, a statement was issued by NMSU Chancellor Dan Arvizu. We'll take a look at a portion of that statement that came out the next day. Quote, "We're sharing this information with our campus community to show our commitment to transparency and to begin working together to implement the recommendations in the report. We said from the beginning, if this review highlights opportunities for improvement, we will pursue those. While the report did not identify any failure by the university to meet its legal obligations, we now know we have areas that can be strengthened. We will soon announce a task force that will work closely with the administration and the Board of Regents to address these recommendations, end quote. Steve, how would you rate the university's response to these issues?
I mean, I feel like the university's done what they've needed to. I mean, some people are probably wanting to see widespread change, but remember, up until what happened here a few months ago, we never really heard any. New Mexico State wasn't in the news for any negative things when it comes to their athletic programs. In fact, it's been mostly success in winning. That's been really the key. I feel like from the athletic administration, they have handled it well. The school, the chancellor, they've said the right things so far. But now you say actions speak louder than words. So again, if the university is able to put this past them and find that they're now able to bring in student athletes and a new coaching staff that will see what has happened before and not allow those same mistakes to be made again, I think that New Mexico State will be okay. However, we also wonder, is there more news that will come out? We don't know. As of now, I think everything is okay, but could there be additional stories? Could there be an investigative journalism and more stories that come out about these events of the last 3 or 4 months? And if that happens, then obviously it changes everything.
Well, obviously the report itself identified some weaknesses, and one of those was not being able to interview key players. Obviously, former coach Greg Heyer has hired a lawyer, and so it was difficult to reach some of those people that I think really had some key information to share. Do you think the investigation is really going to be helpful?
I think when we find out maybe the full results, if those are revealed, you hope that will be. Again, had everybody just cooperated right after the incident and not left when they did, we might not be talking about this the same way. Had they stayed and when the authorities, were there, given all the interviews and the comments, because I don't really think, as you've seen everything develop, I don't really necessarily think the student athletes were in the wrong, including Mike Peake, given what went down. It's just the events that transpired after what happened and going back to Las Cruces and not cooperating and talking to the authorities at the time. I think had that been changed, and you wish you could have had a chance to do it over again, and had they stayed in Albuquerque and done all that and then left, we might not be talking about this nearly the way we have been over the last few months.
And then those hazing allegations surfaced.
Yes.
So at the moment that happened, tell us about, what went through your mind.
Well, first off, I was in Phoenix at the time at Radio Row at the Super Bowl, and that was the end of our last show right before we were getting ready to head back to El Paso from Phoenix, and the game was 2 days away, and then all of a sudden, at about 6:30, it breaks that this hit, and we were in disbelief. We couldn't believe what actually was happening because the events of the hazing hadn't been described yet. All it was that the New Mexico State program was looking to, not play a basketball game and possibly then suspend operations. And you wondered what could possibly have happened that would have led to just putting the whole season on hold after what happened in December. So it was shocking to a lot of us.
Do you think that move was made kind of as a defensive move to say, we've taken control of the situation, to try to maybe lessen any impacts that would come later if they hadn't made that choice?
Considering what happened in December and what happened in February, I think at the point of when the news started to hit the surface, that's when the administration said, you know what, we're done. We're not gonna keep playing. We're just gonna have to just suspend and pause things because it went from bad to worse. And that was not something that New Mexico State wanted to continue to play. Think of the distractions following the shooting. If you had to now keep playing after the hazing allegations, considering that was internal within the locker room, that would have probably been a bigger disaster. So I kind of feel that the university had no choice but to suspend the program like they did.
How widespread at this point do you think that hazing like that is in programs across the country?
It's a great question. And you want to know something, Casey? I was wondering if this New Mexico State story would open the door to other programs around the country and other potential hazing allegations. And it hasn't yet. I mean, when the story first made news, we were looking around to see, will there be other programs around the country saying the same things? But there hasn't been. So maybe not as much as you think. We've heard about it in fraternities and and other part of student life with hazing over the years, but maybe sports itself and college athletics doesn't have it nearly as much, or they're just keeping things very hush-hush and not trying to let it go to the surface.
Well, let's talk about, some of the departures that came, and how difficult do you think it will be for New Mexico State University's next coach to recruit players to the program?
Well, first off, we could be talking about an entirely new coaching staff, support staff, and group of players. I don't know if anybody is going to be back from this team. You might see them all gone, whether they all go to the portal or they go to other schools. That's the one thing that's going to be really interesting. Will there be anybody left from this past administration? And if not, maybe the next head coach is actually looking forward to building an entirely new roster from scratch. It's happening around college sports a lot, especially in basketball. Because of that transfer portal, you're seeing over thousands of ball players go in there and look to go elsewhere on a yearly basis, even when you don't have the kind of adversity like New Mexico State has faced. So for a new head coach, he might want a clean slate and just start over from the ground up.
Any predictions as to who that might be?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's a lot of names that are floating around right now. The one name that's most prominent is Jason Hooten. He's been at Sam Houston State the last 13 years, and it's an interesting name because small Texas school, they've been successful. They've been to the NCAA tournament and to the postseason. He's done very well over there, just hasn't been able to get out and pursue a bigger job. And maybe for somebody like Hooten, this could be the opportunity. I've also heard Dedrick Taylor at Cal State Fullerton. His name's been passed around. Bruce Weber, who's a veteran who's been coaching for many, many years, and also Josh Pastner, who was just let go from Georgia Tech. So those are other names that have also been out there through various media services. But people are telling me that they believe Hooten is going to be the guy. And if that's the case, hey, he's somebody that has done very well, has not had controversy to deal with like we've seen here, and maybe that's the kind of name and coach that would be perfect for this opportunity.
Well, during a news conference, Chancellor Dan Arvizu did express confidence in Athletics Director Mario Mocha. He talked about administrators traveling with the team after the first incident, and I wonder how confident you are in Mario's future with the program.
Let me say this. I absolutely love Mario Mocha. I have since I first met him. I think he's so unique because he's really one of the more real, transparent athletic directors you're going to find. What you see is what you get. And prior to the Greg Heyer decision, his hires have been terrific. Just look at women's basketball last year and what they were able to do in the first year. You look at bringing in and giving somebody like Chris Jans an opportunity. Look what he's done with the football program and Jerry Kill and how that's resurrected it. So, yes. Did this situation with Greg Heyer happen under Mario's watch? Absolutely. Did Mario hire the man that ultimately had the two big incidents that happened? Yes, he did. Am I confident that Mario is the person that can bring this program back? 100%. I think that New Mexico State has the right guy for the job, and I think Mario now might be a little more conservative in his next hire and maybe not take as much of a chance as he did when he brought Greg on board.
The sense I got when he hired Chris Jans was that it was taking a big chance.
Well, he had one incident, and it involved getting caught at a bar when he was coaching Bowling Green and lost his job as a result, but he won 20-plus games. He had been a terrific assistant coach, and you know what? Sometimes you just need a second chance. I saw Mike Price make the most of his second chance at UTEP when he was hired years ago, and sometimes that's just what it's about. So, yeah, I would say Jan's worked out, and Jerry Kill has worked out, and some people thought that would have been risky for the football program. So, you know what? You take chances. It's not always going to work out. And unfortunately, in the case of Heyer, it absolutely did not.
Well, you mentioned women's basketball. I'm so glad you did, because obviously NMSU athletics is much more than just the men's basketball team. What impact do you think this has on other athletics programs at the university?
Well, it's interesting because the other programs have been very successful. We mentioned football, women's basketball. They've been winning. Baseball now they need a new head coach after what happened just recently with Mike Kirby. So they need somebody now that's going to be, a new hire. where I think for the most part, there might be some student athletes asking questions from the men's basketball program and kind of wondering, is this an isolated incident or does it go anyplace else? But from everybody I've talked to right now, the Aggies as a whole have done really well. And you know what? Unfortunately, men's basketball needs a complete reset, but you don't really want to say the same thing for all the other athletic departments and other programs right now.
What about from the fan perspective? What are you hearing from Aggie fans?
Disappointment. I think a lot of basketball fans are upset with how things have gone this season. But you know what? You're a fan. That means you have to be with them through the thick and the thin. And now more than ever, they're going to need the fan base to help rally this basketball team. Because sometimes when you're down at the bottom, that's when you need your fans the most. I'll say this about New Mexico State. They have loyal supporters. They've got a very wide fan base that reaches not just all over New Mexico, but parts of the country. They're very supportive. Mario's raised a ton of money over the years, and I feel like they're going to be behind this program. It might be slow at first, getting them back up on top, but I think the Aggies will be there for their players, making sure that the program will get back where it needs to be.
We've talked a little bit about rebuilding the program. So what do you think is the future for men's basketball at NMSU?
Well, here's the interesting thing. They're moving to Conference USA next season, and that's going to be a tougher league than the WAC. Not just with UTEP, but you have Western Kentucky, you have Middle Tennessee, Liberty's coming in next year. Sam Houston State's going to be in next year. So if the Aggies don't hire Jason Hooten, he might be coaching against them next year if he's still with Sam Houston State. So that's another interesting storyline. CUSA is a tougher league, which means that the basketball program is going to absolutely have to rebuild in a hurry. Otherwise, it might be a tough road ahead for the next few years.
And obviously, as this program airs over the course of the week, things will change. But quick thoughts on March Madness, maybe so far.
Well, first off, we could have a new New Mexico State head coach by the time this airs. And if that's the case, I hope I get it right. You never know. I really do. March Madness is all about upsets. My bracket was in a dumpster fire when the first games came out, and it's been a lot of fun. I love Cinderella stories. I like the Fordhams, the Fairleigh Dickinsons, the Princetons, the teams that nobody are expecting to win but knock off the big seed. That's the beautiful thing, KC, about March Madness. It's David against Goliath. And when David upsets Goliath, it's all about the beauty of college sports. You don't see it in football as much, especially for the college football playoff and the bowl games. You get it in basketball.
Absolutely, that's for sure. And I want to say congratulations to you on becoming a member of the El Paso Athletic Hall of Fame.
Hey, I appreciate that. That's been a lot of fun in itself, and so far for me, you know, I've been doing this almost 30 years, almost as long as you. We're not going to give our ages out, but the point is, we're lifers in this business, Casey. We really are, and we're doing it for a reason because we love to do it. And you want to know something? That's been the most fun for me in the borderland. Is El Paso and Las Cruces have been so nice to me and so loyal, and I just want to thank them all for listening and giving me the opportunity to talk to them all these years.
Sports Talk host Steve Kaplowitz, we want to thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective on this very complex issue.
Hey, I've enjoyed it, and to have me back, I'd love to come and do it again.
All right, so glad to have you. That's our time for now. Join us this week on KRWG Radio. Every weekday, it's Morning Edition from 5 a.m. to 9. Fresh Air at 11, followed by Here and Now from noon to 2. And All Things Considered from 4 to 7. KRWG News is always online at krwg.org. And we'd love to hear from you. Email us with story ideas and video submissions. The address is feedback@nmsu.edu. For all of us at KRWG News, I'm KC Counts. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.